Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. It's my pleasure to have Sudarshan here with us today. So Sudarshan Konidena, he's a postdoc at U Dresden. And today, his talk is going to be about the rheology of dense frictional suspensions in the viscous inertial transition. So something we definitely don't hear about enough. So
Mm.
please, Sudarshan, go ahead. You can start sharing your
Mhm.
presentation and maybe if you want to give us a couple of insights about your background, where did you study,
Okay,
how did you
sure
end up
thing.
in Dresden?
Yeah, sure thing. So my undergrad and until my PhD, I did back in India, and everything in chemical engineering. So the masters and the PhD, I did it in IIT, masters in IIT Madras and PhD in IIT Guwahati. So in my PhD, I worked with dilute suspensions mostly, uh, with the pattern formation in horizontal rotating cylinders. So I was using Stokesian dynamics mostly for discrete particle simulations, and also for continuum modeling, I was using OpenFOAM for the CFD. Then I had a break for COVID before that I was doing a postdoc in IIT Madras again with the active particle suspensions, where I dealt with having an active particle at an interface of two fluids with different viscosities and the movement of these particles. So I basically use the open source Ludwig software, which is based on LBM, to study that. And after COVID, I landed with Bernhard Boventel here in TU Dresden and Braunschweig. I mean, before, because he was before joining at TU Dresden, he was working with TU Braunschweig. So we continued with him to TU Dresden from TU Braunschweig after he got a position here. And then the last 3 4 years, I was working on this problem of rheology of dense frictional suspensions in the viscous inertial transition, almost as good as a PhD. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you very much.
yeah,
You can maybe try to share your slides.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And if anyone in the audience has some question, you can raise your hand or write it in the chat if you're a bit shy, or but you can ask the question during Sudarshan talk, so don't hesitate.
So you can see the
Perfect.
presentation.
Yeah, very
Cool.
nice. Thank you.
So then I'll start.
Yeah.
So I'll thank the organizers first to you, Leah and Michelle, for inviting me to this talk on this wonderful forum. Excited to share the results of my research work for the past 3 4 years on this forum. So for the next few minutes, I'll be discussing about the rheology of dense frictional suspensions at the viscous inertial transition. So this work is mostly done by me, my colleagues Alireza Korabakshi, Franco Tapia, and Bernhard Bovinkel at U Dresden, along with our French collaborators Elizabeth Guazzelli and Pascal Osilos. So then this will be the presentation plan of the talk right now. So I will be introducing the motivation of the problem. Then I'll discuss the pressure imposed rheology and the volume imposed rheology, which are the two frameworks that are used to understand or suspensions. Then in the pressure imposed rheology, I will discuss the theoretical framework that we followed and the numerical setups that we have, and also the finally the results and discussion from the pressure imposed rheology. In this section, I will also draw parallels between the micro scale, mesoscale, and the macro scales that are involved for the rheology. Then I'll jump into the volume imposed rheology, where I'll discuss the effects of confinement and also the effect of the roughness of the shearing walls on rheology. and the viscous inertial transition. For that, I'll discuss the numerical setups that are used and also the significant results that we get from the volume imposed rheology before drawing into the conclusions from the pressure and the volume imposed setups. So yeah, so here I'm showing the pictures from different applications that we can encounter for dense suspensions. So here we can see the flow of mud flow or lava flow or the blood flow. This can be used in the natural, this is usually seen in the natural settings. And also we have a lot of industrial applications like pharmaceuticals, etc., where it is obvious that to have a good understanding and comprehension of the flow behavior of these dense suspensions, uh, uh, right from in the perspective of both physicists as well as industrialists. So the question is, what is rheology? So rheology is basically the study of deformation of a material to any applied stress. So the complex materials like emulsions, etc., that we see here on the right side, they show different phenomena like shear thinning and shear thickening as well. So there are also other phenomena like shear induced migration, where these particles flow from high shear rate regions into the lower shear rate regions. So these materials cannot be grouped into conventional solids or liquids, as they cannot be solved using the classical fluid mechanics or the solid mechanics equations, which actually raises the need for a two-phase model to have a constitutive equations for the suspension. Then what is the central property of these materials? So the central property of these particulate materials would be mu and phi. Mu being the macroscopic friction factor, and phi is the particle fraction or the volume fraction of the particles that are present. So if we have these two parameters, then the rheological response of a material, it can be expressed in terms of constitutive equations and provide a closure for the two-phase models. So I will be discussing about the regimes that we are interested in for the flow of these dense suspensions. So as the name indicates, we have two different regimes. One is the viscous regime and the other is the inertial regime. So uh, the macroscopic friction factor mu that we have, it is basically defined as the ratio of shear stresses to the granular pressure. So the stresses in the viscous regime, they scale as they are proportional to eta f gamma dot, where eta f is the viscosity of the suspending fluid and gamma dot is the shear rate. So in the inertial scale, these stresses are proportional to rho p d square gamma dot square, where rho p and d are the density of the particle and the diameter of the particle in of the suspension. So in the viscous regime, which is also known as the Newtonian regime, named after Newton, we have the single non-dimensional number J, which governs the rheology. So this is pretty famous for rheologists, as we already know. J is the non-dimensional number defined as the ratio of the viscous forces to the granular pressure. And the work that I'm showing here, I mean, the figure that I show here is from the work of Boyer, 2011, where I'm showing the variation of mu and phi with J. So we can see how for different viscosities of the carrying fluid, all of the data has a good collapse for mu and phi. The same is the case for the inertial number, where we have uh, the in the inertial regime, which is named after the scientist Bagnold, also known as the Bagnoldian regime, we have the non-dimensional number I squared, which is the ratio of inertial stresses to the granular pressure, which governs this in the inertial regime. Also, the figure that I show here, which is showing which shows the variation of mu and phi with I in the inertial regime, it also shows decent collapse, as in the case of Boyer. but there is no such consensus as far as the viscous inertial regime is concerned. So the focus of the present talk will be to understand if there is a single non-dimensionless number like the I or the J which governs the viscous inertial transition. So for this, now I will discuss about the major contributions of the viscous to the viscous inertial transition. Though there are several works that describe about the viscous inertial transition, I will focus my talk only on the major contributions. One from the numerical study by Trulson et al. In 2012, and the other an experimental work by Tapia et al. In 2022. So, so the numerical study that is done by Trulson et al. In 2012, it suggested that both the packing fraction phi and the macroscopic friction factor mu can be governed by a single dimensionless number k, which is defined as j plus alpha I squared based on the principle of stress additivity. So alpha is nothing but the reciprocal of the Stokes number at which the viscous to inertial transition occurs. Also, the Stokes number here, it is defined as I squared by j, which is nothing but the ratio of inertial stress scales to the viscous stress scales. Another major outcome of the work of this numerical study is that the Stokes number at which the viscous inertial transition occurs is 1. And also we can see from the figure how the phi and mu are nicely collapsing with the same k. As mentioned earlier, experimental and numerical studies that are done that are also done, they agree well with results of the numerical study of Tolson, that the Stokes of transition is around 1. However, the experiments done by Tapia et al. In 2022, which I'm showing on the extreme right, the figures of phi by phi c and mu by mu c versus k, you see that there is a good collapse for the data of phi, but as far as the mu is concerned, we do not see the same collapse that we see in the case of phi for different viscosities of the carrying fluid. But in the inset, now if we change the k that we used and we collapse the data for mu, then we have a different k at which the collapse happens for the shear stresses which are reflected in the macroscopic friction factor. This implies that there are two different k's, k phi as j plus alpha phi I squared and k mu as j plus alpha mu I squared for each for the volume fraction and the and the macroscopic friction respectively. So from these experiments, there is another significant result that the Stokes number for the viscous inertial transition for the granular pressure as well as the shear stress are distinct, and they are 10 and 114, which are very much different from the other experimental works or the numerical studies that are done. So there is no other study till date to explain the unique transitions for the phi and for mu that are obtained from the experiments of Tapia et al. Therefore, the objective of my talk will be to investigate via our particle resolved numerical simulations um, the discrepancy that we see in the transition of the volume fraction and the macroscopic friction. Here I am showing the numerical framework or the numerical method that we used to handle both the pressure as well as the volume imposed rheology. For our CFD-DM simulations, we have the fluid solver, which is nothing but the Navier-Stokes equations, which involve the momentum and the continuity equations. In the momentum equation for the fluid, we have the FIBM term that is shown here, which is basically the coupling between the particle and the fluid motion. And then for the particle motion, we solve the momentum and the torque balance, force balance and the torque balance equations. For the force balance equation, we have the contributions from long range hydrodynamics, buoyancy forces, as well as collision forces. But in the case that we investigate, there is no effect of buoyancy since the particles are neutrally buoyant. I mean, the suspending particles are neutrally buoyant. And the collision force term, it consists of three different terms, contributions again, one from the lubrication, and then we have contributions from the contact forces in as normal and tangential contacts. So the lubrication force here, that the formula that I show here is basically dependent on the viscosity of the carrying fluid. Also, the another feature of our model is that the lubrication forces are maintained constant if the distance between the particles is less than eta n or eta n minimum as shown in the formula. And then for the normal and the tangential forces, we have the formula that are used in the simulation shown here. Kn and Kt, they represent the spring constants. Dn and dt are the damping coefficients, and mu f here is the interparticle friction factor. So as I said earlier, we investigate both the pressure imposed rheology as well as the volume imposed rheology setups. And for the next few minutes, my focus will be on the pressure imposed rheology, and this is currently under review. The work that I'm sharing here, and I'll proceed right now.
Can I ask you a couple of questions? I'm sorry, I wanted to raise my hand, but I cannot find the hand on the Zoom meeting for some reason.
Uh-huh.
Can you quickly go back to the previous slide with the equations? So yeah, I have a couple of three questions. One is not really a question, is more to make it clear to the audience. So let's start with that. How do you find the correct IBM forces?
So the correct IBM forces that I use here, it is based on the model that is given by Ullman in 2005.
Okay.
So uh, we use the formula. I mean, we use the methodology that is described in Ullman 2005 to get the IBM forcing. Um, and there is also and for the particle, we have this Lagrangian points on the surface of the particle, which basically help in coupling the particle and the fluid.
Thank you. And so for lubrication, I suppose that it's only the normal ones,
Yes,
right? Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
And can you just give maybe a couple of details about the space discretization? How big is your mesh with respect to
Sure.
the particles?
I will
Okay.
describe that in the numerical
Okay.
setup.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. So should we go ahead? Okay. So yeah, there comes the great resolution. So the domain that I use for the pressure imposed rheology is given on the right hand side. Oh, I just lost the presentation. Is it still visible?
Yes.
Okay. How do I?
Um, Maybe navigate through your tabs with all tab.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
So this is the simulation setup that we use for the pressure imposed rheology. So the box size is 10 times by 10 by 10.6 times by 10 times the diameter of the suspended particle. So the grid resolution is 200 by 212 by 200, which means that each particle has 20 grids. And Now, the geometry is maintained periodic in the flow and the vorticity directions, and it consists of a total of 871 neutrally buoyant particles which make up the suspension. And there are 49 particles on the top plate and the bottom plate, so totally 98 wall particles. There is also a difference between the diameter in the wall particle and the suspended particle, where the wall particle is 1.3 times the diameter of the suspended particles. So also we have the variation in the diameter of the suspended particles for with maintained as 5%, so that there is no crystallization, that we don't have this problem of crystallization of the suspension. Then we assign a weight on each of the top plate particles, so that all this weight on the top plate corresponds to the pressure that we intend to apply. Then there is also a reservoir space above the top plate, above the shearing top plate, so that now the top plate has it is free to move up and down based on the collisions, on the response that we have from the collisions with the suspension. Then there is also a no slip condition that is applied on the surface of the particle and also on the shearing walls. Then we performed simulations with the three different viscosities, which are 1,110 times the viscosity of water. Then I will now show the major results that we have obtained from the numerical simulations of the pressure imposed rheology. Here I am showing the P and mu with respect to K phi in the figure A and B. So the rheological data for phi here, it shows a good collapse, but the collapse for mu in the figure B is not as good as that we want for um as that we see for the volume fraction. So then the viscous inertial transition for the volume fraction we can see here is Stokes it happens at a Stokes of 8, and then for the mu it happens at a Stokes number of 16. This is what is reflected in the experiments, meaning that our simulations could reproduce the experimentally observed slower transition of shear stresses, but qualitatively there is a difference from the experiments and the simulation. So this quantitative difference from the experiments is this can be attributed to the confinement, the lubrication, and the friction models that we used in our simulations. So then, since we understand that there is a discrepancy, I mean, there are two different K values one for phi and one for mu. We would want to investigate what is essentially causing the slower transition of tau, or the slower transition in the shear stress. To that extent, what we did is, since we know that the combination of mu is basically uh, it is coming from the normal hydrodynamic and tangential force components. So then we separated the into the contributions from the normal force, the tangential, and the hydrodynamic. So here, figures A and B, they show the variation of mu h with respect to K phi, and the inset of figure A here is about the variation of mu n with K phi. So we can see clearly from the inset that that all of the data for the three viscosities, they collapse onto a master curve, implying that there is no diverging behavior of the normal forces, meaning that the discrepancy in the shear stresses could be a reason of either the hydrodynamics or the tangential force contribution. But then we can see that at lower k values, mu h is almost negligible or zero. and becomes valid only at higher k values, which is not the case with mu t. So here we see that mu t is basically showing this diverging trend much earlier compared to the mu h. So then we understand that the tangential component mu t, it has a much higher divergence compared to mu n and mu h. So from this, we can argue that okay, mu mu t is one which is actually triggering the influence of lubrication forces, and this is what is responsible for the diverging scaling of mu. Then we would like to bifurcate the tangential forces and understand what is happening uh, for the same k. I mean, let us say what I want to say is that we will now understand the value of, I mean, for a small value of for I mean, I'm sorry, the value of k is very large, but the magnitude is small, 0.065. But still, this is a very large k value, and we have taken a k value where the uh, shear stresses show a maximum divergence. So then we now look at how at different viscosities of 1000 and 10. So one has the Stokes number of 0.65 and the other has a Stokes number of 206.5. So when we have a lower Stokes and high viscosity, we can see that the force network here, it is mostly the tangential force network, it is mostly from the coming from the rolling contacts, and the sliding contacts are sparsely populated, and the magnitude of the rolling contacts is very high as well. So in other words, we can say that the network structure, it is mostly based on the rolling contacts in the case of uh, in the case in the case of high viscosity. And if we look at the higher Stokes number and low viscosity, here we see that the sliding contact forces are more in number, but still the magnitude of the sliding forces is very small. Sliding contacts is very small compared to the contribution of the rolling contacts. However, the number of rolling contacts here is much reduced. So we can say that now the fabric of the suspension, it is basically supported by a lot of sliding contacts. However, the magnitude of the rolling contacts is higher when compared to the sliding contacts. So we can also say that now the suspension is basically moving from a completely rolling or the rolling dominated regime in the viscous regime into the when it is moving into the inertial regime, it is mostly sliding contact dominated. Then we define a number known as chi, which a parameter called chi, which is basically the sliding fraction. It is the ratio of the number of contacts which are sliding to the total number of contacts in the system. Then on the figure A that I show here, it is the variation of chi with Stokes for different viscosities, and we obtain different curves which are shifted based on the viscosities corresponding to the. I mean the leftmost curve is the most highest viscosity, and the rightmost curve is the lowest viscosity. However, if we now introduce a third variable called the distance from jamming, which is shown in the figure B, then we see that there is a nice collapse for all the data for chi. This is intuitive because for the largest viscosity that we have, the distance from the jamming, it is small uh, because of the lubrication forces, and the contact forces are mostly dominated by rolling contacts. However, this is not the case for when we have, I mean, when
distance from jamming is basically small when compared to the when we are going into the sliding regime. So based on this observation, we can now interpret that there are two order parameters. One is the sliding fraction, which is given by chi, and the other is the distance from jamming, which is given by uh, the delta phi, which are basically unifying the viscous to inertial transition. And this is a major result which illustrates that as the suspension is traversing from the viscous to the inertial regime, it is also traversing from the rolling to the sliding regime. So here I am showing you the macroscopic response of the shear cell, one in the viscous case and the other in the inertial regime case, where we have for the lowest for the viscous regime we have a very low Stokes, and in the inertial regime obviously the Stokes number is very high. So if you see how the system is behaving, we can see the interaction between the particles as the particles roll. And this response is also shown on the movement of the top plate as the suspension is dilating and contracting based on the collisions of the particles. However, this is not the case when we have the inertial regime. So in the inertial regime, what we can observe is that the top plate is now not moving in tandem with the collisions that happen inside the suspension, and also and also the uh, contacts between the particles are now completely sliding contacts, and we see no particles that are rolling here, or at least the fraction which are rolling is negligible. So this is basically the macroscopic response of the shear cell to the suspension, to the shear of the suspension. Then I'm showing you the same thing, the whatever we have seen from in the video. Now I'm quantifying that in terms of the granular pressure and the volume fraction. I am showing three cases, one for the least Stokes, the intermediate Stokes, and the other in the inertial regime. For the least Stokes, we are in the viscous regime. So the red line, which is denoted by the Stokes 0.015, it shows a lot of oscillations which are in phase with the manner in which the top plate is moving. So, which is not the case in the other two for the other two Stokes numbers, and for the maximum Stokes number of 120, which is denoted by the dotted line, we see that there is complete uh, there is no relation between the stress response and the response of the top plate. So basically, what this means is that there is a lot of microstructural rolling to sliding that is happening inside the suspension, which is actually reflecting on the movement of the top plate. Uh, and also this is reflected, I mean, this is basically the link that I said of the micro, macro, and the meso scales that I said I would discuss in the talk. Then we have what would happen if we change the interparticle friction coefficient. So the results that I had shown earlier are all with an interparticle friction coefficient of 0.15. But now there are three different interparticle friction coefficients, two additionally. One is 0.5 and the other is 0.8. So the left figure, it shows the variation of phi versus k phi. Though there is a noise in the data, we can see that there is a master curve that is collapsing all the data. And this master curve is essentially the same one that we see for the 0.15 earlier, that we have seen for the 0.15 friction factor earlier, which means that this means that the Stokes of viscous inertial transition, as far as the granular pressure is concerned, it is not changing and the value has remained at 8. And now this value is very much similar to the results of the experiments of Tapia et al., where they have found Stokes to the viscous inertial transition, the Stokes number is 10. Then I show the effect of changing the interparticle friction coefficient and on the macroscopic friction factor. So here on the right of the figure, there are the blue and the green correspond to the viscosities 1010, and the other lines are basically the different interparticle friction factors. So we see that if we keep increasing the friction factor, interparticle friction factor, the delay in the transition of the shear stress is increased. So, for the highest interparticle friction factor that we investigated, which is zero 0.8, we see that the Stokes to viscous inertial transition is 250. So this is the results that as far as the pressure imposed rheology is concerned. So the volume fraction transitions at a Stokes number 8, which is close to the number of 10 as shown in the experiments of Tapia et al. And also we see there are two different transitions, one for the granular pressure and the other for the shear stresses. And the tangential contacts that are actually triggering the lubrication force. This we have seen from the way that the forces are decomposed, and then there is also the viscous inertial transition, which we see that it is going also from the rolling to the sliding. Then we have seen how the effect of jamming or distance from jamming is affecting the uh, transition. Finally, we also have seen how the interparticle friction affects the viscous inertial transition. Uh, and this is as far as the pressure imposed rheology is concerned. Then now I will move into the volume imposed rheology. This work is mostly done by my colleague Alireza Kodabakshi, and this is in review for Acta Mechanica. So here, now I'll proceed with the volume imposed rheology. The main aim of this analysis is to understand the effect of the confinement on the confinement of the shear cell on the suspension, and also the effect of the roughness of the shearing walls on the rheology of the suspension. Since we now change the dimensions of the cell, uh, we have we are we also have the Ly, that is which is affected mostly because we change both the confinement and surface roughness, and this is reflected in Ly. Here we have this dp by dwall for the reference setup, and the ratio of dp to dwall is 1. H, which represents the distance from the top plate to the bottom, from the center of the top plate to the center of the bottom plate part. It is 6 times the diameter of the suspended particles. And here the box dimension Lx, Ly, and Lz relative to the suspended particle is 11 by 7 by 10. And also in all the cases that we have investigated, the grid resolution is such that each particle it has 20 grid cells. So based on this reference setup, there are also other setups which focus on the effects of confinement and also on the roughness. But before proceeding to that, I'll show the results of how the rheology is from this for the reference setup. So for the volume, this is the effect of the volume fraction on the rheology. Here I am showing the variation of shear viscosity, the normal viscosity, and the macroscopic friction factor with respect to the Stokes number. The
we can see how the eta s and eta n, which are nothing but the shear and normal viscosities, are plateauing at low Stokes numbers, which means that the plateau is basically the viscous regime, and then as the Stokes is increased, we go to higher stresses, which means that the particle is now in the inertial regime. So basically, the results here, the gray results are from the experiments of Tapia et al. 2022, and the colored ones are from the simulation from the numerical simulations. These numerical simulations also show trends that are similar to the ones that are seen in the experiments, meaning that they show plateau and then they increase first. Also, for two different volume fractions that are investigated, one being 0.52 and the other being 0.545, the results agree well with the experiments that as we increase the volume fraction, the stresses are increased. So it also shows qualitative agreements with those of Tapia et al., just as in the case of the pressure imposed rheology. And the macroscopic friction factor, which we see here on the extreme right, it shows the curvature for the maximum macroscopic friction factor. It is more pronounced when we have a higher volume fraction. So this is also a result which is consistent with the experiments. So then, to investigate the effect of confinement, we introduced three more cases, which where the extreme left is the reference case which we described earlier, and the three new cases are case rough one, case rough two, and the case smooth. So the rough one and reference case have similarity in the sense that Ly by dp for the dimension is the same. However, the diameter of the wall particles are now increased for the rough one, which means that the diameter of this particle is similar to the particles that are used in the pressure imposed setup. However, the arrangement of the particles here is in the case of is like a hexagonal arrangement, which is not how the pressure imposed setup is done, where the arrangement of the particle is more uniform in the case like it is a square form of an arrangement. Then in case two here that we see, it is case rough two, where we have the Ly by dp, the ratio of Ly to dp is maintained as 7.3, meaning that now the confinement is increased and the ratio of dp to the wall is to that of the wall is maintained constant with the previous case. And then we have lastly we have a completely smooth case where now the ratio of the wall particle to the suspension is decreased, and it is at 0.8. However, the confinement in this case remains as 7.3, which is similar to the case of case rough 2. So basically what we are doing here is to play with Ly by dp and dp to the wall ratios. This basically, in the rheological results for the volume imposed setup is shown here, where we have different, the colors here indicate different roughnesses and the symbols correspond to the volume fraction. So since the triangle is for the higher volume fraction case, which is 0.545, and all the other are, uh, are, are for the case when the volume fraction is 0.52. So unifying this transitional behavior, how can we unify this transitional behavior is that if we consider the values of the shear viscosity, normal viscosity, as well as the macroscopic friction factor at a
at a value when the Stokes is reaching 1, and then we use those values to normalize the viscosities and the macroscopic friction. Then we obtain this transitional behavior for the viscosities as well as the friction factor. So we can see for different cases of roughness, so the behavior of eta s is changing um, in each case. So also an important result from these observations is that now the Stokes of transition is happening at a Stokes which is close to 5. The viscous inertial transition is happening at a Stokes number which is close to 5, as we can see from the first two figures clearly. And also the trend for mu that we see, which is basically a weakening trend for the macroscopic friction. It is reflected in the fact that the transition for shear stresses for the shear stress is lower compared to that in the normal direction, which is basically the granular pressure. So this trend is also similar to the experimental observations of Tapia et al. Then basically I'll draw the conclusions for a comprehensive reading for if the readers or the listeners are very much interested in the comprehensive detailing of the volume imposed rheology, there both the I mean the an extensive work is on archives for the volume imposed rheology, and so I'll come to the final conclusions that I would like to discuss here. So for this, the transition from the pressure imposed rheology, we can say that the transition is governed by basically the rolling to sliding motion. And then this rolling to sliding motion is unified if we have the Stokes number combined with the distance to jam interaction. Then from the volume imposed rheology, we have seen that there is the surface roughness and the confinement effects, which basically change the stress response of the shear cell, and that the transitional Stokes number, however, it is not, it remains unchanged with the change in the boundary conditions for different cases that are investigated in the volume imposed rheology. So that is all that I have for the presentation. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So how was
You
I on the time?
perfect, absolutely perfect. You can
Okay.
keep your slides on if you like, so you can
Okay,
directly
sure.
answer the questions. So as always, let's start with the people from the audience. If anybody has questions, otherwise I'll be happy to break the ice. Okay,
I
well,
do.
go.
Okay, sorry.
Please,
I
no,
do
no,
have
no.
just
You go
one
ahead.
question. If you were to, I'm not doing any simulations. I'm more of an experimentalist person. If you were to advise me, I'm not also working on suspension, but if I do one day, how would you advise me on seeing those signature transition on my rheology curves? Where should I look first? What should be my first parameter to look at?
So first, basically, I think you have to look at phi because that's the most robust.
Yeah, right.
I mean, the question that I understand, if it is correct, just let me know. If not, please explain again. So you
Yeah,
are asking how to understand if the suspension is actually transitioning from a viscous
exactly.
to, yeah.
Yeah,
So it, I can show you the figure and maybe then it's easier to explain.
because yeah.
So here, if you see on the left, we see the work
Mm-hmm.
from Boyer. Here,
Yeah.
there's no transition. Basically, you can see that mu and phi, they are both following the same law. They are obeying the
Mm-hmm.
J rheology.
Yeah.
And here we can see that they obey the I mu of I rheology. And here from the experiments and the simulation results, so you see on the extreme right, I'm showing both phi and mu.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
the same k, you can see that phi is already there. You have a master collapse for the data of phi, but for mu, there's not the collapse is not yet done. So if you
Okay.
rescale that mu, you get a different k and a different transition. So there are two different transitions, one for mu and one for phi. This is what we
Yeah.
have. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. And no matter the geometry, no matter the
Yes, exactly. No matter nothing. Uh,
exactly. So I just look at it and I just have okay, this is the parameter. Okay.
exactly. Yeah.
I didn't know it was that obvious for any geometries, any rheometer, any test, any okay.
It should be.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Really reliable.
I
Um,
I do
yeah.
have a couple of questions about your, well, the take-home messages that you showed at the end.
Yeah.
Um, Before that, have you tried, um, it's a biased question because that's what I'm trying to do also on different systems. But have you tried to do any contact network analysis, like any measures of the Z-net, for example, some classic stuff, or uh,
We
given that
have,
you do say that it's this sliding rolling motion that's causing these transitions. So you see that in the microstructure, so especially in the contact network. So have you tried to measure something in that sense?
yes, there is an ongoing work I mean, we went out, we are using this tool called the persistent homology, where we can understand how the networks are formed. I mean, I think you are familiar with this persistent homology. Um, So there are these Betty numbers at the end, which basically collect how the total number of loops that are formed inside from the structures. So we are currently working on how to estimate a proper. I mean, we can give a proper estimate of this rolling as well as sliding based on this persistent homology, right? So we are actually currently looking at that. But however, for the volume imposed rheology, this is already done, and the paper in the archive, it has different analysis for this persistent homology based on how the structures evolve for the sliding as well as the rolling conditions. I mean, in the viscous as well as the inertial regimes. Yeah.
And have you tried, um, again, given that it seems that everything lies in the contacts and the frictional contacts, and how do they behave if they're sticky, so rolling or sliding? So that's the main mechanism. Have you tried to use, for example, there is this work, again, another biased question, but this work by Peter Peters et al. From 20 well, that's 2019, where they show, so practically, have you tried using a load dependent mu s, where mu s is the friction coefficient?
No, we haven't tried that.
Okay.
I think that should
So
be
it's a
just
different
being.
model. So you just have a
Yeah,
mu,
exactly.
a frictional coefficient that is dependent on the load. So
Exactly.
for each particle, you compute the
Yeah.
load, and then based on that, you check, and your mu s may change, and in particular, it decreases with the load.
Yeah.
And I mean that explained different mechanisms. I was just curious if you tried to um,
Mm.
try different models, for example. Again.
No, this model we haven't tried, but it sounds pretty interesting and worth
And
trying. Yeah.
well, another also about the models. Have you tried using a rolling friction, for example?
No, we haven't explicitly used a rolling friction as
Yeah.
such. We have this model, as I explained earlier, it incorporates both the rolling and the sliding, but we haven't tried new models into this
Okay.
because
Okay. No, I mean
the
it's just a curiosity because
yeah, yeah,
I
sure,
suppose it's gonna change quite a lot the results. So it would be
mhm,
interesting to see what's the effect of any of those.
of course.
Okay.
Mm,
Okay. Thank
mhm,
you. Thank you so much.
mhm.
Any more questions? Okay.
Uh, Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, sure.
Okay. Thanks for the nice presentation. So I have two questions. In your numerical setup, you have two different particle sizes. One
Yeah,
in the bulk, it's a
yes,
different size, and at the bottom and top plates, the size is different.
yes.
Why is that?
Why is that? Is because we wanted to replicate the experimental setup where they have on top of on the top plate in the experiments they have a grid basically to allow water to seep through, and then it is like a reservoir on top. So we wanted to mimic the same setup, and then we made this top plate with particle instead of a grid because we want to have collisions with the top plate, and then the liquid also can seep through the interstices between these particles. Also, why it is made a bigger diameter is because the diameter of the grid in the experiments is the same as that I used for the particles. And also, we have changed in the volume imposed rheology. You can see how the top plate, if we change the diameter of the top plate, there is also a change in the stresses, uh, of course, obviously. So, which is how, but there is no change in the viscous to inertial transition as such, but the stresses do change if we change the diameter of the plate particles.
Mm. And if you
Maybe
change the diameter of the bulk particles, do you see the same collapse with so you showed three different cases for different fluid viscosity,
yes.
but if you change the particle size itself, does it have any effect? And
I don't think so because all of these are reflected in the Stokes number, where we have the diameter of the particle included in the I number. So the Stokes we account for. So all these parameters, whatever we change, it is changed in the Stokes number. So it is just the Stokes number that is affecting. I don't think if you change the diameter of the suspending particles, you will have a different result as such.
maybe the Stokes at which your viscous to inertial transition happens changes.
No, that's what
Okay.
I'm uh, uh, maybe because of the top plate, but not of the entire suspension as such, because uh, it that is reflected in the Stokes number, the diameter of the particle, and even if you change the diameter of the particle, which makes up the suspension, if you it is just a higher Stokes number, right? Uh, so you can, it is not that the entire suspension you have a change in the viscous inertial transition.
Okay. Thanks.
Mhm. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question.
Yeah.
Um, have you looked at the velocity profile in the confined simulations? Is it a linear profile?
Yes, yes, it is a linear profile. Yes,
And,
it
and
has a small layering, small disturbance because of the layers that are formed, but it is on an average, it is almost a linear profile.
and does the shear rate you get from the velocity profile, is it the same as the shear rate you would get by dividing the wall velocities with the gap distance?
So you're basically asking if the imposed gamma dot is same as the local gamma dot, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, I don't think so. For the volume imposed, I haven't checked them as such, but for the pressure imposed setup, I think the gamma dot for the local will be a bit different from the overall gamma dot.
And when you write down the rheological laws, which gamma dot do you use?
The gamma dot that we use is for the overall gamma dot, not the local.
The imposed one.
Yes, yes,
Okay, okay, okay. Okay, thank you.
yeah.
Okay. Any more questions here? Okay, well, if not, I guess we can thank again Surendra
Sudarshan.
and
Sudarshan.
Sudarshan. Sorry. I was
Maybe
um,
you remembered a friend of yours.
well, it's one of the other speakers. I'm so sorry.
No problem. Okay. Yeah.
The end of the
And
day.
no, but I mean, he was here. I was just having a
Mhm,
chat with him, and
mhm,
my brain just merged everything. Sorry
mhm.
again.
No issue.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
again
Thank
for
you,
the very
actually.
nice talk. It was
Hmm.
extremely interesting.
Yeah, it
And simulation and suspensions, I can just be very happy about that.
I know
Of course.
that. I know that. Thanks for
Thanks.
inviting me.
Thank
Of
you.
course, of course.
Pleasure is mine. Yeah,
Yeah, I hope to see you very soon.
you
And
too.
thank you also for all the participants to be here. We're
Hmm.
gonna be here again in a couple of weeks, as always.
Hmm.
And looking forward to it. Thank you all.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Bye bye.
thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Bye bye.